Let's give Donnie, Lance, and Mitch another round of applause. That was fantastic. All right, we're arriving at our final fireside chat. This one's going to be focused on improving citizen experience. I'd like to welcome to the stage Marcy Jacobs, Deputy Secretary and Chief Digital Experience Officer for the state of Maryland. She also has a very great background in the federal government as well. So welcome, Marcy, and your moderator, Michael Cole, CTO for Federal Civilian at GDIT. Let's give them a warm welcome.
You know, if we just sit here, it'll go quicker. We don't have to talk.
We can just sit here and stare at everybody.
It's gonna be nice.
I actually know some people out there somewhere.
Right. That's it. Yeah. So it's been interesting to listen to all of this. Like, it's micro learning. I didn't know we could pack this much into 2 hours, but I think if we had purpose-built a session for us to talk about and follow up, I think this would be it, because we've heard from acquisitions, we've heard from improving technology, we've heard about improving process and how we engage with services, which we're all starting to do more digitally. So when I think about your role of digital experience officer, it really kind of solidifies what that is, right? But your role is bigger than just digital experience. So if you could just kind of give us a little insight into what you do on a daily basis, I think it's a good way to start.
Yeah, sure. When I took this job, I was coming after a short stint in consulting in between. I was leading the digital service at Department of Veterans Affairs, which was very focused on delivering digital services to veterans. And I assumed that the job in Maryland would be very similar to that. And in many ways it is. It is focusing on how do we make it easier for Marylanders to get the services that they need, whether that's through websites and getting information, through applying for benefits, services, permits, all of the things that 120 agencies provide. But uniquely, my team is also responsible for oversight of our major IT development program, which represents $2 billion of investment in major IT projects across the state. And that's where I've been able to really kind of dig into some of the core problems that I have seen from 20 years in federal government to what I'm seeing now in Maryland. And I think the challenges that I see are very common, and it's been really interesting hearing some of the sessions talking about user experience and change management. But we are really trying to shift thinking about technology as implementing technology to thinking about technology as the backbone for how we deliver services. And it can't be a team over here doing user experience things. It needs to be an integrated kind of upskilling of how we approach the problems globally.
So that's interesting. You talked about your organization. I know we have an order, but we're going to switch a little bit the order, but it's same topics. You talked about your organization. I think you've aligned your organization a little bit differently, and it has a little bit of authority that a lot of organizations like yours may not have. I think that's one of the ways that you're using to improve the acquisition and how you move forward. Could you give a little insight into what you did?
Well, I would say that the oversight function really gives us the ability to kind of set the rule book for what we're expecting projects to how they structure themselves, how they think about their approaches. And we are right now in the midst of some very significant reforms to how we say, what does good look like? Because it doesn't uniquely look like on time and on budget, which is the benchmark that I think a lot of these projects have been measured against. You can be on time and on budget and still deliver a thing that doesn't solve the problem that you're trying to solve. So the conversations that we are having with agencies about their projects is, what will be better when you are done? What are you solving for? And historically, I think a lot of the problem that they go in is, I need to modernize technology. We need to replace old thing with new thing. How are you thinking about the humans that interact with that? The humans on the state side, the humans on the agency side, and what are you actually improving as opposed to just building a shinier version of what you had that maybe is more stable, but you haven't actually made it easier to engage with government, you haven't made it easier to process applications, so you're just kind of moving your problem downstream.
Yeah, and I think the way you just said that's really interesting, the fact that you start with your problem and work your way backwards. And then when we think about digital experience, or even the title, we say citizen experience, I think digital service goes much further than that, right? So we heard Dr. Fletcher talk earlier about how they had a very older version of moving overseas. You would fill out your paperwork and throw it over the transom, and then it's on a boat, and maybe you'll find it when you get to where you're going. We had a conversation where you said, digital engagement, digital experience doesn't stop at the submit button. I think that's interesting. So could you elaborate a little bit on what you mean by that statement?
Yeah, I think for a long time I've been trying to define where does digital end and then what happens after that ends. The digital experience is influenced by so many things. So yes, when you hit submit, then what happens? Somebody actually receives your application, your whatever, typically your form, and then needs to process that. And if the tracking and managing of that process is terrible, maybe your form was easy, the digital piece was easy, but then to actually get an answer on your benefit claim, on your permit, if that takes a year, that's a terrible experience. And what I heard when I was working actually at Department of Veterans Affairs was not knowing what was happening was worse than knowing that the answer was, it's going to take us a really long time to get to you. So having that, like truly thinking about the kind of transparency and building in all of the steps from the front stage, what's happening, to what's happening in the background, and being able to influence all of those pieces is helping us transform things. I would also say that digital experience includes things like the letters that are sent out by your systems, the emails that people get, the calls that people are having, and how are all those things consistent or inconsistent? So if you can't understand the correspondence saying that there's a fraud alert on your unemployment claim and you don't know what to do about that, your experience is influenced by all of these different pieces and how they get stitched together. And what makes it hard is that all of those pieces are owned typically by different groups. So having that common thread of being able to stitch together what's happening on the website and the application and the call center and the letter and potentially even in person is what kind of all comes together to be that holistic customer experience.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because, you know, as a citizen, we fill out, we hit submit, it disappears, but we can automate the front end all day long. We can make it faster for that person, but there's also the citizen who's on the inside of the agency, the employee, right, who's actually got to interact with that. And just overloading with them with stuff doesn't really make their life any better either. And it sounds like from what you're saying now and what we talked about is like you're also focused on helping the internal employee improve. So how do you approach the internal aspect of the citizen experience?
One way that we do that is not thinking about it as two different things, because anything that's happening on the front stage is going to translate to something happening on the backstage. So if we make it really easy to submit a form that previously was not easy to submit, we've now created potentially a large volume of new applications coming in backstage. And if backstage is not working well, the people receiving those applications are going to be drowning. So understanding through like service design, what is happening front stage, what are the friction points, what happens when someone receives that application, where do they get stuck, and how do we think about that holistically so that we aren't just adding more volume and potentially even delaying the answer even longer. So I had a great form and I submitted that, and now I wait even longer to get my answer.
Yeah, it's frustrating for everybody involved, I think. I loved what you said earlier about you engage humans where they're engaging with technology. And we've got 20 seconds left. So it's really quick, which is great. Everybody's super happy. You heard the laughing. They're all like, yay. It's been a long day, but a lot of information. What's the last thing you want to leave this audience with as we walk off the stage?
The people who are designing systems are not the people who use the systems. And if you are not talking to your users, you are missing a huge opportunity to de-risk what you are building. The people who are using your technology are the people you need to be building for. You have to engage with them. There is no shortcut. There is no AI magic. You have to talk to people.
I can't top that. That was great, Marcy. Thank you very much.